The fire had reached the curtains before Clara noticed the scent of smoke. It crept like a thief through the cracks in the floorboards, curling its fingers up the stairwell, greedy and silent. The mirror caught her eyes, face streaked with ash, hair wild, clutching a single bag and a yellowed letter that smelled of flour and old sweat. She didn't scream. She walked straight through the front door, flames crackling behind her, and didn't look back. That house had been her husband's, and then it had been a tomb. Now it was cinders. She had $37, a pair of boots a size too big, and a job offer from a place called Broken Stone Ranch, Montana Territory. Clara Bell, widowed at 23, scorned by neighbors who'd whispered arson, when her husband died in the barn fire 6 months back, left the East with nothing but calluses and a quiet rage. The journey west stripped her further. The wagon driver had yellow teeth and little to say. The trail was hard-packed dirt and dry creek beds. She passed charred wagons left behind after raids, deer skulls nailed to trees as warnings, and crosses without names. Towns were few and mean, their saloons louder than churches, their stairs longer than prayers. She'd heard talk of Comanche uprisings, cattle rustlers carving their way north. Even the land felt dangerous, big, wide, and utterly indifferent. Days blurred. Nights froze. Clara slept with a knife beneath her skirt and one eye open. When she dreamed, she saw her husband's hands, blackened, clutching a bottle, and the fire that didn't start itself. Broken Stone Ranch wasn't on any map, just a mark scratched on the back of the letter. She found it 2 days past where the trail turned to nothing. A split-rail fence, weathered signs swinging in the wind, horses chewing dry hay. Smoke rose from chimneys like tired breath. The first face she saw was tanned leather wrapped in whiskers. "You're late," the man said, not unkindly. His name was Emmett, the ranch boss, skin like sun-baked bark and eyes like river rock. He didn't ask questions. "Kitchen's yours, cowboys eat before dawn. You don't feed 'em, they don't work, you don't want that." There were 8 of them, riders with thick hands and sunburned necks, some barely more than boys. Boots scuffed from miles of riding, mouths full of curse and dust. They nodded at her, half curious, half dismissive. One spat tobacco into the dirt. Another looked her up and down like she was a colt on auction. But one didn't look at her at all. He leaned against a post, arms crossed, coat dark and dusted, hat pulled low. His boots were cleaner than the others. He didn't speak, just watched. Clara turned her back on him and stepped into the cookhouse. It smelled of rusted iron and stale coffee. Mice scattered. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. 3 days passed in grease and fire. She rose before light, boiled beans, fried bacon, baked bread till her knuckles cracked. The cowboys ate without thanks, except one, young Tom, who tipped his hat and smiled like he'd never seen a woman who could wield a skillet. She ignored him. She had no space for flirtation, no energy for charm, but she could feel the eyes on her, always the same weight, the same silence. The man by the post. He never sat with the others, never took seconds, never offered a name. She asked Emmett about the owner. He shrugged. He ain't been seen in 2 winters. Some say he's dead. Some say he watches from the hills, but he signs the paychecks. That's what matters. The unease settled like dust. Something about the land itself felt coiled, like it was waiting. That night, the wind screamed through the shingles. Clara lit a single lantern, wrapped her shawl tight, and sat by the hearth reading the letter again. "Need a cook, no nonsense, pays fair, stay out of trouble." No name, just a mark. A scuffle startled her, clatter near the meat pantry. She grabbed the poker and inched forward. A coyote, scraggly and thin, stood sniffing the flour sack. It bared yellow teeth but didn't move. She raised the poker, heart pounding. Then it bolted, yelping into the dark, and she saw him, not the animal, the man, outside the window, half shadowed by moonlight. The watcher. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood, his outline framed by the silvered night. Clara's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the iron, then he was gone. Only the wind remained, whispering through the cracks, colder than it had been all week. The sun hadn't touched the hills yet, But Clara was already ankle-deep in ash and flour. She cracked eggs one-handed over the iron skillet, eyes heavy, lips pressed tight. Her fingers were raw from hauling sacks, chopping wood, scrubbing pans, till the metal groaned under soap and steam. The ranch woke slowly, coughs from bunkhouses, boots dragging on gravel. But Clara had been awake since 3. The Cowboys came in like a storm of hunger and sweat. They fought over biscuits, grunted thanks, and spat stories about horses breaking loose or cattle gone missing. Clara moved among them without speaking much. She kept her head down, apron streaked, arms steady. "Smile, darlin'. Might make—" "The beans taste better," said Hank one morning, leaning his greasy bulk against the door frame. His voice carried the scratch of whiskey, even before breakfast. His eyes never quite reached hers, always stuck somewhere lower. Clara didn't smile. "You want food or a show?" That got a laugh from a couple of the boys. Hank didn't laugh, he leaned in. "Heard about your husband. Shame what happened. Fire like that. Some folks say it wasn't no accident." Clara's grip tightened on the skillet handle. She said nothing, just turned back to the stove and let the heat speak for her. Later that evening, she scrubbed harder than she had to. The water steamed, reddening her fingers. The sky outside had turned a sickly green-gray, the kind of color that whispered storm. She dried her hands and sat by the window, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Her voice was quiet, almost afraid to break the silence. "Dear Thomas," she said, the words catching in her throat. "I made it. The ranch is as wild as they come, nothing here but men and dirt and silence." She stared at the page, then continued, slower now. "I still hear you in the crackle of firewood. I know what you did, and I came here to forget, but it follows me." She didn't finish the letter, just folded it back up and tucked it behind the lantern. That night, the storm came down like the wrath of something older than God. Rain hammered the cookhouse roof. Thunder cracked the sky open, and the wind screamed through the cracks like it wanted in. One of the cattle pens burst under the pressure. Clara saw it through the slats, a gate swinging wild, calves spilling out like marbles. No one else stirred. She threw on her coat and ran out barefoot, slipping in the mud. The cattle were panicked, eyes wide and wild. Wolves wouldn't be far behind. She grabbed a torch and lit the brush pile near the fence line, flames licking up like angry tongues. The heat was fierce, the wind fiercer. She held her arms up, screaming at the beasts, trying to herd them back. Through sheer stubbornness, something moved behind her. Not cattle, not wolves. A man. He stepped into the glow of the firelight, long coat soaked, hat pulled low, face unreadable. He didn't speak. Just whistled once, low and sharp. The cattle stilled. He moved with quiet authority, boots silent in the mud, guiding the herd with no more than gestures and soft clicks. Clara watched him, stunned. He didn't look at her, not directly, when the last of the calves were penned again. He turned and vanished into the night without a word. The next morning, the ranch buzzed with gossip. "Ghost cowboy came back," said Tom with a mouthful of cornbread. "You see him. Didn't have to. That gate was fixed by dawn." Emmett didn't look surprised. "If it was him, we owe him. He knows. This land better than we do?" Clara asked. "Who?" They looked at her like she'd missed the punchline. "Ash," Tom said. "Used to ride with the owner. Quiet type. Don't talk. Don't miss." "Thought he was dead," another muttered. "Last we heard, he got shot trying to stop Hank from selling off stolen stock. Vanished after that." Clara kept her thoughts to herself, but later, outside the cookhouse door, she found a fresh haunch of venison wrapped in cloth. No note. No trace of who left it. That night, she salted the meat and hung it to cure. She didn't sleep. At first light, something was wrong. The Cowboys gathered near the barn, whispering. Clara walked over slowly, towel still in her hands. Hank was there, tied to a post, bloodied, one eye swollen shut, gagged with a dirty rag. His pistol lay just out of reach in the dirt. Emmett stood over him, arms crossed. "Looks like someone's had enough of Hank's mouth." No one stepped forward. Clara looked past them toward the hills. The morning mist curled along the ridge, like smoke. Somewhere out there the fire still burned. The fence groaned under the strain of wind and age. Ash crouched low, fingers working the wire taut, his hat tipped against the sun. Clara had watched him for 5 minutes before stepping out from the cottonwood trees, her boots crunching dry. "Twigs, you fixin' fences now?" she asked. Ash didn't look up. "Always been broken," she folded her arms. "You tied Hank to that post?" Still no eye contact. He twisted the last wire into a knot and stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "He talked too much," he said simply. "That's not a no." His gaze finally met hers. The wind picked up around them, thick with the scent of oncoming rain and distant smoke. "You stayed when you could have run," he said. "Most folks don't." Clara's jaw tightened. "I got nowhere else." Long pause passed between them. It wasn't empty. Lightning cracked far off over the ridge. They both turned toward it, instinctive. The storm was rolling in fast, low clouds boiling like smoke from an unseen fire. Then came the thunder of hooves. Clara turned sharply. From the northern pasture, the herd, spooked, frantic, was charging straight toward the creek bed. A few hands shouted, waving their hats, trying to break the stampede, but it was no use. "Move!" Ash shouted. He was already mounting up, reins in hand. Clara grabbed the closest horse, bareback, no saddle, and scrambled up. They rode hard, mud and hoof tearing at the ground, the wind howling through cottonwoods like a warning. The cattle moved like a tide, unstoppable, chaotic. Clara rode alongside Ash, flanking left. Her fingers bled where the reins burned them raw. Her hair whipped into her eyes. She couldn't see the ground, just flashes of horns and hide and earth tearing. Beneath them, a calf stumbled in the chaos. Clara veered, trying to guide it clear. Her horse slipped in the muck, legs giving out. She went down hard. Pain exploded in her chest. The sky spun above her, a wash of gray and panic. Then a strong hand grabbed her collar, yanked her back onto a passing horse. Ash's horse. He didn't speak, just rode. By the time the herd was turned and slowed, the rain was coming down in sheets. Thunder grumbled low over the hills like a threat yet to come. They made it back to the bunkhouse soaked. Bruised and silent, Clara winced, clutching her side. Ash peeled off his coat, revealing a long gash torn across his shoulder, fresh and deep. "Sit," she ordered. He did. By lamplight, she stitched the wound. Her fingers trembled from cold and adrenaline, but her touch was steady. "You should have left me," she muttered, dabbing blood away. Ash glanced at her. "Would have been easier. You don't strike me as the heroic type." "I'm not." She tied the final stitch. For a moment, her hand lingered on his skin, scarred, sun-darkened. "Solid. Why are you really here?" she asked. Ash looked toward the rain-spattered window. "My brother, Elias, built this ranch. When he died, half of it came to me. Hank didn't like that. Thought the help shouldn't own dirt, let alone land." Clara sat down across from him, breath-catching. "You're the owner." "Half of it," he said. "I left after Hank tried to sell cattle off to a gang out of Cheyenne. Told him I'd go to the marshals. He and his friends put a bullet in my chest and left me for dead. And now?" I came back quiet, watching, waiting. Clara looked away. She understood now why the men spoke his name like a ghost story, why the herd calmed around him, why he moved like the land itself. "Why tell me?" "'Cause you're not like them. You don't want the land, you just want a place to stand." The silence between them felt warmer this time. Real. Outside, the wind shifted. Later that night, the air turned still, too still. Clara sat by the hearth, rifle close. The fire had burned low, but she hadn't dared sleep. Her bones ached from the ride, from the fall, from every wound that had never quite healed. Then, crack. A single gunshot shattered the night. She jumped up. Another shot. Then shouting. Horses. Glass breaking. She threw the door open. Flames licked the edge of the barn. The night lit up in orange and gunpowder. Ash burst into view, face grim. He tossed her a rifle. "You want to stay," he said, voice sharp, clear. "Then fight for it." Fog clung to the ground like a spirit that wouldn't let go. The first shot cracked through it just before dawn. It didn't echo. It thudded, flat and close, like a hammer against bone. Clara ran out of the cookhouse barefoot, rifle in hand, apron flying behind her like a war flag. Figures moved in the grayness, shapes on horseback, guns raised, yells, curses, and hoofbeats tangled in the air. One ranch hand fell with a scream. Another fired blindly into the mist. Ash stood firm. By the corral, shotgun braced on his shoulder. He dropped a rider in one shot, turned and saw Clara. "Stay low," he shouted. But she didn't. Not when Emmett, barely more than a boy, staggered toward her, clutching his bleeding side. A rider charged behind him, pistol raised. Clara didn't think. She stepped into the rider's path and pulled the trigger. The man flew from his saddle, crumpled into the dirt. Her arms shook. The rifle felt heavier than it had before. Emmett collapsed beside her. "Hold on," she whispered, dragging him behind the water trough, pressing a hand to his wound. "Hold on, damn it!" Ash moved like a ghost between shots, firing, ducking, reloading. He dropped 2 more men near the barn, but the numbers were against them. Shadows kept coming. Hank's men, rustlers hungry for land and cattle and revenge. Then, through the fog, Hank appeared. He rode slow, deliberate, pistol swinging at his side, watching the chaos like a man watching his house burn. He dismounted near the porch, cocked his revolver, and walked toward the corral. Ash met him halfway. The guns were gone in a blink, thrown aside. No one spoke. They crashed into each other like bulls, fists flying. Dirt kicked up in clouds. Ash slammed Hank into the fence post, splintering wood. Hank kneed him in the ribs, drove a punch into his jaw. Blood flew from both men, raw, unflinching. Clara rose, hands trembling on the rifle. Ash had Hank down, hands around his collar, ready to finish it, but he let go. "You ain't worth the—" "Stain," Ash breathed, pulling back. That's when Hank pulled the knife. From under his coat, a flash of silver. Ash didn't see it, but Clara did. She fired once. The shot hit Hank in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The knife clattered to the dirt. He fell, stunned, groaning. Ash turned, eyes wide, breathing hard. Their eyes met through the fog. The silence that followed was thick with smoke and morning dew. And then, just like that, it was over. The remaining rustlers fled. The ranch hands slowly emerged from cover, some limping, some carrying others. Blood stained the troughs, the fence posts, the porch steps. Clara sat down in the dirt beside the cookhouse, rifle in her lap. She didn't cry at first, not until Ash walked over, crouched beside her, touched her shoulder. Then the tears came, not loud, not dramatic, just a slow, unstoppable leak, like a dam finally giving way. She wept for Emmett, who lived, for the man she killed, for Thomas long gone, for every sleepless night and every bruise she carried from places no one could see. "I'm here," Ash said, just that. Later that week, the town sent lawmen. The rustlers were rounded up. Hank, injured and humiliated, was taken away in shackles, raving about blood and land and betrayal. No one listened. The land was ashes again, all of it. The deed was offered, sealed, final. But he shook his head. "This land don't belong to men with names on paper," he said. "It belongs to those who stand for it." He didn't say more. Clara stood at the edge of the corral that morning, watching the sun rise in a blaze of gold and fire. Ash tightened the cinch on his saddle. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Don't know yet." She handed him a small bundle of bread wrapped in cloth. "You'll come back hungry." He paused, nodded once. Always do. She didn't ask him to stay. He didn't ask her to leave. That was the understanding. Ash rode out without fanfare. Just a trail of dust and the slow clop of hooves over packed earth. Clara walked back to the cookhouse, sleeves rolled high, apron tied firm. She passed the place where she first saw him fixing the fence, past the spot where she'd stood with a rifle and a broken past. She took her place in the kitchen again, but something in her hands had changed. Out by the stables, the boys saddled, up for the day's ride. She nodded to them as they passed one by one. Then, just before stepping inside, she looked out at the hills, now bright, clean with dew, and open as far as the eye could see. Her voice came soft, steady, Narration from a future self. I came here just to cook, but the land had other plans. The screen slowly fades to the silhouette of Clara standing alone at sunrise, apron fluttering in the breeze, a coffee tin in her hand and iron in her spine. If Clara's story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt lost until the land called you home, hit that like button. Share this with someone who's fought their own quiet battle. And don't forget to subscribe for more frontier stories that cut deeper than a branding iron. This land has more tales yet to tell.